Hey guys, so this video we're going to take a look at this model someone sent me. He was asking what's wrong with the topology on it. So we're going to run through this thing. It has a number of different issues that I think a lot of beginners will run into. And it's definitely a good learning project to figure out how to create low poly prop models. And we're going to talk about creating low poly prop models throughout the video, of course. But I'm going to leave you guys a link to a tutorial in the comments that you can go check out that'll explain the high poly to low poly workflow in extensive detail. It's actually really good. And this is by a guy named Joe Sieber. I think I said his name right, but he's one of the guys that contribute to Polyhaven. So I'll leave a link down there in the description for that. First, let me kind of get some stuff out of this scene. This here, I'm going to get rid of. This artist was modeling to scale, by the way. So it's a very small object. And we can see that because he brought in a reference character, which is Manny from Unreal Engine, right? We'll get rid of him though. And so there's one other object in here that's hidden. I already went through this a little bit to check some of it out. This one we don't need. I'm going to go ahead and delete it. That way I can just press Alt-H and unhide things and not have to worry about having double whatever that was, right? So when we first look at this model, it looks like a TV, right? I think that we can all agree on that. But there are a number of topology issues with this, specifically as it relates to creating a game low poly model, right? Game ready low poly model. The biggest issue is actually kind of a really big issue. It's broken into a lot of different little pieces and parts, and there's a lot of hidden faces on the inside of this thing. And there's little things that don't need to be occurring that are occurring because of the modifiers being used. In this case, this is a bevel causing this little guy here to happen. So it needs quite a bit of extensive work. Also, if you're just getting into doing game props, I highly recommend going with high poly to low poly first, just as you're learning. At some point, you'll find that you can actually model things very similar to this and turn them into high polys very fast. So there is a low poly to high poly workflow as well, which actually works out quite well sometimes. And there's also a mid poly workflow, which let me just kind of explain that real quick. When you have an object like this, if it was not beveled at all, it was shaded sharp, right? You're doing high polys to low poly, you'd have to bake this and bake a bevel into it. Mid polys rely off of small chamfers usually, and they contain their shading by using usually weighted normals. However, if you use hardened normals with a bevel modifier, it's kind of the same thing. And you can see it holds its shading on its own because of that chamfer. It has enough geometry that it can figure out which way to point the normals in order to create the correct shading on it, basically, right? You would have to go through and do that to the whole model for the most part to create a mid-poly kind of a model. But the biggest issue with this one is that it is in all separate pieces. And this becomes a problem. I'm going to duplicate it and right click, convert it to a mesh. So Shift D to duplicate, right click to just place it in the center where it was, and then right click and convert it to a mesh. Just move it out. I'm going to join it together. I'm going to do some little prep work here. I'm going to Smart UV project it first, give it a little bit of island margin maybe. For the UV editing window, that was too much island margin. Let's try that again. Press U, unwrap it, boom. Okay, not quite enough. Very, very touchy. When you get to smaller size objects, even if it's realistically scaled, the controls in Blender get a lot more touchy. I'm going to talk about that a little bit here in a second, but I want to get this thing going just to show you what's happening here. We're going to do a quick bake on it. Shade it auto smooth. I'm going to get rid of all these sharps real quick. Press N, bring out my side panel. I have the text tools add-on installed. This is a great UV editing tool that you can utilize, but it has a baker included in it, or its own version of a baker, I guess. And so we're going to do AO. I'm going to change the AO to be a 1024. And change the samples here to something like 80 for now. It's not going to be a good AO bake, but we'll bake it like this. I want to show you what's happening here and why you want to avoid those double faces. This is a big one in my opinion. All right, so it all bakes out. Everywhere it is black, this is a hidden face, right? There's a lot of hidden faces here, or there's just texel space that's not utilized for the most part. Okay, so about half of this texture, if I don't zoom out too fast, about half of this texture almost, it seems like, you don't even see it. So if you're going to unwrap this thing and you're unwrapping every face that's not needed, a lot of times internal faces, just get rid of them. You don't need them. And on top of that, we have just kind of weird things happening and occurring here. Like the TV screen is separate. That's not to say you can't do things like this. Plenty of game artists have done this, and there's times you will actually want to do things like this. This might be one of those cases, but behind this, there's another face in here. It covers this whole back section. So we get some kind of weird overlaps and things like that going on. Not ideal in general. And plus, this is all going to occupy, like if I rip that face real quick by pressing Y, hitting G, that's going to occupy the UV map in that whole area. And look how much of it we actually wouldn't see. TV screen's already in front of it, right? So we're only seeing these little small sections in here. We don't need to have this wasting our UV space. So we need to start combining things together, basically, is what's going to happen here. When you combine things together, more than likely you're going to use booleans. You want to watch out for things like this. This is kind of another weird little thing that can happen. You have a vertex being created here on a curve, right? And as a result of that, it wants an edge that goes all the way down here. Okay? Which isn't necessarily a bad idea. So there's another problem that pops up on this model quite a bit. And that is we have these edges here. They're even numbers. So we have 4. Usually you want 1 that's down the center. So you want uneven numbers. If that was the case, this would actually, like if we merge these together at the center here, you can see, I'm going to press M, merge at center, right? I'm using Machine Tools Smart Vert feature to do that. It's like Shift 1 or something like that. That gets pretty close to that point we want to get to. We could probably get away with that and use 3 segments or 3 edges instead of the 4 there, right? That might work out better going all the way down this to the back here, but that might be too low of a count as well, because you can see now we can see clear faceting. It's not very smooth, it's not very curved. So it also might be very, very low for something you might be creating. You might not always get away with that. So on the flip side of that, this is a little weird because you can't really, you could try cutting this in. It's not going to work out well. Instead, what I would do is run a loop cut through here. You can see it wants to cut all the way down that way. And I really don't want it to do that. So I don't want it running out necessarily all the way to the end over there either. We're going to play with this, I think, in a little bit. I want to kind of boolean this together first so I can get it a hold of this vertex that's going to be created right there. And so we'll combine it first before we go messing with it. Another issue that popped up was that this here, well, it looks fine. It's not. If we do face orientation, you'll see that it's backwards. So it turns red. I usually just use backface culling. It makes the back faces invisible. That's something I got used to. I think it's quite useful, but like if you were to export this to Unreal Engine and look at it in Unreal Engine, the back faces would turn invisible. So it would be the same behavior you would see in most game engines. You can grab something like this, hit Alt-N, or go into edit mode, select it all, Alt-N, flip it. And you can see we got another face here on the side. I might have messed a boolean up or something. I'm not sure exactly what happened there. Oh, maybe I deleted the wrong one. I think I deleted the one that had that cut out. So you know what? Let me show you a little trick about this. We know this is here in this position. So I'm going to use a knife tool. We have only this piece selected right now. It's kind of hard to tell what's going on, but I'm going to use a knife tool. I'm going to start in this corner here. I'm going to press A. Oh, no. I'm going to press A and Z. Excuse me. I'm going to press K, use the knife tool, and we can just hit Z. You don't have to hit A. You could do Y if you wanted. Z. You can cut things out manually still, no problems. You might overextend one like this, so you can start back over here. You right click. You can go back to that edge and meet it. I think you just dissolve that, Control Exit, quick dissolve. So we'll punch this area out, basically select the faces and delete them. That'll give us back that shape that was there originally. So this is still backwards. Alt and flip it. All right. Another little side note. This from the front, you can't see any depth here. If you were to turn on cavity, this is a smaller object, so cavity doesn't look like it's working. You can play around with, we'll set it to both real quick. Turn ridge off, it's misleading. Don't use ridge. It'll make you think there's problems when there's not. But under that little gear icon, you can see we can change the distance here. Because this is such a small object, we need to change this to be smaller. You can see we can adjust that. We just want to do things like this so that we can tell the depth when we're in an orthographic view. While you're orbiting, you can hit Alt, jump into orthographic views. Not a big deal. All right, so, and then that little issue is caused by the bevel, right? You can see this bevel as well. It's got 3 segment. Want to use 2 maybe on this one. It's really small. You don't need more than that. Probably get away with a chamfer even if you wanted to, but we'll use 2 for now. And we'll clean that up later. We'll go around and fix that. A lot of these things have those same kind of issues. And this is going to come down to what you really need out of your model as well. If you're doing a low poly game model where you need really small amount of triangles, remember face counts count n-gons, quads, if it counts everything. Triangles is what matters the most. But if you need a very small amount of triangles, like you're doing mobile assets or something like that, perhaps, you need to start optimizing for that and across the whole model and keep that kind of resolution in mind that you're optimizing for. So like if you don't need a bevel, don't use it. You don't need it, don't use it. Okay. In some situations, things like this are actually more optimized than if you were to actually combine them together. So sometimes you don't even combine things together always. In this case, like this here could be much lower in resolution, and they can be separated still, and it would be fun. It would actually save you triangle count by doing that, because instead of rendering an n-gon over here with an additional edge coming out and another one over here doing that, it might be cheaper to just have this like this, right? You see, like this has a back face in it. You might not even need that back face. You might want that back face. If you can't see the back face in here, that one way back there, you can get rid of that. All right. You can see it goes all the way to the back. You might not even need it to do that. Probably just take these and press S, X, and 0. Flatten it out. Bring it forward. That back face there, we don't need to see it. Just delete it. Delete the face, boom. All right. Kill off those bevel weights and the sharps if you have them. If you're not using them, that is. I'm not using them, so. All right, so something like that might be better. And of course, if you need bevels, bevel things accordingly, right? So you could do something like that if you needed to. All of this stuff up front here, not the sides. You can use the cursor selector with C, middle click, deselect, right click, get out of it. This front section, you can Control X, try to dissolve it. If it doesn't dissolve, which it's not, there's a good odd chance. I'm going to place the origin. Well, it's its own object, right? Yeah. I'm going to place the origin point on this edge. You can do Shift S, cursor to selected, right? So cursor to edge, possibly. Go back to object mode, set origin to 3D cursor. Or if you have the machine tools out on, you just grab an edge, Shift S, and do origin to edge. It's easier that way. But this should allow us to now symmetrize. It should be in the center, right? So we can use mesh machine if we have it, or a mirror modifier. We can symmetrize. And a lot of times you need these additional edges in order to dissolve some additional things like that. It's just one of those weird things that you have to deal with because Blender needs the additional geo to calculate the faces of the n-gons and whatnot. But if you don't need those additional edges and you can get rid of them, then you can get rid of them. You can see in this case, we can actually get rid of pretty much all that except that front edge. And even that front edge we don't necessarily need. We can slide this over over here, and that's fun. Okay. Remember, at the end of the day, everything, get rid of the bevel real quick. Everything is triangulated. And so an ideal triangulation, you would have these corners running out to these corners here, right? That doesn't always happen naturally. Like even if you play around with some of the settings here, longest diagonals, shortest diagonals, it may or may not occur. So sometimes you have to do things manually. That's one of the weird things about 3D modeling. Here in Blender is you actually have no way of controlling triangles unless you triangulate. So it's kind of like 3D Studio Max, you can do it. You can still control them, even if you're using quads and whatnot, but here in Blender you can't. Unless it's a quad. Excuse me. Because if this is a quad, and we don't, let's see if we can do this. We'll turn a triangulate modifier on, see if it happens. You can Control F, face data, flip quad tessellation. Yeah. So you can see, you can flip quad tessellation, but you can't do n-gons. You can do n-gons in 3D Studio. That's what I was getting at. So not that that's important on that one, but this is kind of the idea is that when you're creating these low poly meshes, you need to be paying particular attention to triangulation, amount of segments you're using on the edges. If you're using sharp edges, you're going to use seams on those, by the way. Sharp edges get seams. Not all seams have sharp edges. Okay. You're going to use a cage to bake. If you're going to go to this low poly level here where you have sharp edges, right? If you're doing the mid poly workflow, you don't necessarily have to. You shade it auto smooth. You max it. If you have enough geo to support it, what ends up happening is that you'll have a nice shading on it if you're using mid poly workflow and you're doing chamfers. All right. So yeah, we still got a lot of a lot of stuff to get into still. All right. This piece here, yes, we can do a Boolean on it. I just want to explain something. They have to be manifold. Well, they don't have to, but it's preferable if they're manifold, which means they're solid. There's no holes in it for the most part. It's all filled. When you grab those two objects, you can use the Bool Tools add-on that comes with Blender. So if you want to go to Preferences, Add-ons, Enable Bool Tools, check Wireframe. It makes it easier to work with. You can hit Control-Shift-B. You can do Auto Booleans, which are destructive, or Brush Booleans, which are non-destructive, and they use the modifier. We're going to do a destructive union just to get them going. I'm going to shade it Auto Smooth. I have to remove custom normal data on a lot of this stuff. And that's going to be because he was using on the bevels, he was using hardened normals. So I might have to do that quite a bit. Also, auto smooth is the same as marking an edge sharp. Just keep that in mind. But a lot of times you want to use something like 50 to 55 degrees. It usually works out best. But you can fluctuate your values around whatever you think works best. Sometimes even this, you can see it just gets a little bit squirrely. These angles here, we didn't quite meet the threshold even at 75. Right? And so that can be a little bit tricky, or it's marked sharp. It's still sharp. So let's get rid of this sharp, see if that helps it. Okay, that's a little bit better. All right, so if you mark an edge sharp and you have bevels somewhere and you were to add a weighted bevel modifier, or excuse me, weighted normal, not weighted bevel, check keep sharp, change the weight to whatever you want. 100 works out well a lot of times, but you can also use face influence. If you have any weird discrepancies left over and you've got your bevels kind of set up and your sharp set up, you can always hit Alt-N and try to set face strengths here to strong on the big faces usually. Just the big center ones. Usually works out best, but you can fluctuate these to be weak as well if you wanted to. But face influence has to be checked if you're going to use that. It's not really a good example here, but just keep that in mind. So we can start combining things together is what I'm getting at here. We can have a lot of fun with this. We can prep things before we combine them to make our life easier. So if we find something like this and we're like, you know, we want to keep this kind of a setup here, but we really got to apply the bevel, right? We can dissolve things like this perhaps. We can merge things like this over. Or GG twice, slide them over. We can merge it now. AM, merge it by distance. If you can symmetrize something, symmetrize something. Saves you some time, right? Yep, you can see that didn't work out there. Let's try it again. Oh, it moved the bottom too much, so we're not going to do that one like that. It's not in the center. But it's in the center the other way, I think. I hope that was right. I don't see a double edge, so it should be okay. All right. You're looking at these and you're thinking, like, this is not good either. You don't have to represent those like that. Like, you just do the center one. You don't have to, you see what I'm saying? It's all triangles at the end of the day. It wouldn't really matter if it was even like this, because it's probably going to triangulate that way. Or something similar. The main thing is that when it triangulates, you don't want to create super, like, elongated, thin triangles. Like, these are kind of doing it, but not really. You just don't want them to be, like, super cramped up to the point that it creates bad shading or, like, bad UVs and things like that. All right, anyways, so we got that out of the way. Let's get rid of that triangulate. / unisolate. So we're going to try to combine these two now. You can see what's happening here. This is slightly off from this piece. You may want to keep that depending on what you're modeling. I mean, it happens. You don't necessarily have to combine these together. The only reason why this would be beneficial, I think, is because this is all dead space back here. We're only seeing like this border in the UV. So it might be more beneficial to combine it together, but it would actually be a cheaper triangle count if it was just a big face back there. But because it has that little bit of an edge that pokes out, I don't know if that'd be a good idea. So we just combine them anyways. Grab those two. Do the auto Boolean union. You see it kind of goes crazy for a second. You're going to see me doing this a lot, clearing sharps. I got to clear custom split normal data. Shade it auto smooth. I had a weighted normal on it, so it kind of went back the way it was, right? Okay, so this is joined together now. This piece, you see here, it's kind of like doing that weird thing. And this is that elongated triangle, basically, I was just talking about. You triangulate it. You can see it actually reversed the triangulation too. But it's like this. It's not actually not even a bad case of it, but it's still not what you want. Something like that. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to go through here. I'm going to create an ingon by dissolving those. So when you do a loop cut, we got 2 ingons on each side. Loop cuts don't go through. I'm going to add one in the middle. There's an add-on called Set Flow. You want to download this thing, install it. You select the edges here. Make sure you edge select. You set flow, boom. It's going to create the curvature here that you need for that additional edge. You could actually grab all of these. You could even try to set flow across that whole shape if you wanted to. But it's going to fluctuate these out here. You'd have to move those basically. So I don't want to move those just yet. I might tweak them if I was doing this model to finish. I'd probably tweak it later on and try to make this edge better. But you need an additional edge here for this basically, is what's going on. You can see it really doesn't fix that shading either. Kind of a weird thing about triangles. First, let's try to clear all this up and get it going just right. I figured that would have done something with that, but it did not, did it? Okay, so this triangle is still shooting all the way across the model, and for whatever reason, it doesn't like that. You can see, like, we can start doing things like this, and it's almost like this is going to need a custom normal here. And instead of doing that, I'm just going to move these over on X, and I'm going to eyeball it. I do this all the time, where I just kind of eyeball things and hope the shading works itself out, but sometimes it doesn't. So you might have to go through and fix some things like that. Shade auto smooth. Oh, might help if I have a sharp here as well. You can manually tag sharp sometimes. Ah, look at that. There you go. A little bit better, perhaps. A lot better. Anyways, keep moving on now. Got that kind of solved. This isn't really a big issue right here. I don't think any of this is detrimental to what we're working on right now. We can dissolve that whole edge in the middle if we wanted to. And I'm just going to dissolve these, get rid of the creases and all the other fun stuff that happened. redissolved that, just symmetrized it. I might have messed it up symmetrizing it. I don't know yet. Yeah, I feel like this was mirroring across something that is no longer here. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but maybe I am not. I'll probably have to fix that. I'm pretty sure the other one was way over here. Shift S, cursor is selected. Shift A, create an empty, plain axis. Send it over a little bit. Grab that. Use a dropper. If there was an object that we needed to mirror across, we could use the base again, or we could use an empty and tweak it. See? Pretty easy way of doing that. Sorry if this is a little bit fast for you guys. I know some of you guys try to keep up with this kind of stuff. It's a lot to kind of do on this one because it's just a number of different things, but you have to get through it and you have to keep kind of a speed to it, a rhythm. Whenever you're making a model, by the way, you got to keep like a momentum to it. If you start getting dragged down in any one part, it's going to kind of kill the whole project and you might not finish it because of that. So this one's kind of interesting. We have a bevel going on here. Okay. So I'm going to make my life easier. I'm going to do a decimate, set it to planar, type in 0.05. Okay. That didn't work out the way I thought it was going to. It's close, but 0.65, I guess. All right, so I'm going to apply that. Convert to mesh. We're trying to get all of this back into there. So it's kind of like pick which one you want to do first. Like we could do this like housing, or we can do this guy here first. I think the housing I'll do first. The bezel or whatever. I don't know what you call that thing. It's got a weighted normal on it. Just get rid of it a second. This bevel. I'll probably use 2 segments. And then join it to that. Or, excuse me, boolean that to that. Auto boolean union. Go to edit mode. As soon as you do a boolean, always go through, clean it up. I'm going to clear sharps, but I want to make sure I get rid of the bevel weights. We're looking for like places that didn't join together, perhaps. Or double vertices, double edges, just weird stuff occurring. I'm trying to get rid of that stuff, basically. Surprisingly, this here, we could probably get rid of these edges because they're not contributing a whole lot. The only reason you might want to keep something like that is you can see the triangulation just goes crazy. So once again, if you need edges, you need edges, keep them. They're still going to exist as triangles through this area, more than likely anyways, to some degree. It's a very thin strip down here. This actually causes a little bit of a problem, and it creates kind of like an artifact effect when you're looking at this model in a game engine, because this is going to display a little tiny 2 edges next to each other, like FXAA, anti-aliasing and stuff. It doesn't blend these kinds of things very well. And so it creates like a little nasty edge on your model. A lot of times, if like you can get rid of the really thin strips, do get rid of them. They don't really benefit you that much. It's not contributing a whole lot to the silhouette, perhaps. And so, yeah, it might not be needed at all. So let's just kind of start doing some booleans and going crazy. I'm going to try to do this a little bit faster. Oop. You see that one was mirrored too? Yep. Make sure we get that. I'll do the base here, union, and then I'll do these to that, union. This should be able to union to that, I think. Sometimes things like this, you don't have to union. Like if this was like a little text thing or whatever, you might be able to just float it here or just have it intersect even. But in our case, we're going to try to combine everything together just because it used to be like common practice to do that so that you didn't have weird shading or, excuse me, weird lighting issues inside of game engines. When you had direct lighting, different objects that were separated would have different shading on it a lot of times, and it just didn't look right when they're next to each other. So like a weapon would be all one piece, or a character would be all one piece. That was kind of this normal practice back in the day. I actually took this in Unreal Engine to see if I could demonstrate like it doing something like that. Lumen doesn't do that quite noticeably, I don't think. If it does do it at all, it's really hard to see anything that might be out of the ordinary. But this is that original model. Like, it's not been tweaked or modified or anything. You can see it displays like it's mostly correct. The biggest issue is that when you have faces that are stacked one on top of each other, at some point they will more than likely Z fight, but it might be a while before that happens if they're pretty far apart. So we probably wouldn't see any Z fighting right there. But maybe some of the other ones we'll see some. You can see the normals are backwards here. Okay, and yeah, so any number of little things, weird shading issues. And of course, Lumen's going to have its bounce sliding going on here, whatever that's doing. All right, so let's go back to Blender. We'll try to keep going on this one. I'm going to get a little bit sloppy with it, but we're going to get it combined at least. I'm going to do Machine Tools cleanup feature. Saves us quite a bit of time there as well. I think I'll combine these to that. You know, these ones right here, combining it will actually increase the triangle count pretty good because we have all this extra stuff going on here. This would be one that you might consider not combining, but you don't want to have a big empty space either. You might just do something like that and then cull it. There's a good odd chance you can do things like that still. So like if you can inset it as far as you need it and then cull it, you're not wasting texture space on your UVs, right? There's a possibility you could do things like that too, if you wanted to. In my case though, I'm going for that entirely combined together, which is going to be a higher triangle count, but it's just good practice, I think, sometimes. And create a custom normal. Let me clear that. Your sharps, bevel weights down. I do a lot of manual stuff. And the modifiers are great, but they can get a little bit tricky sometimes because there's so much stuff that you need to think about doing. You can see we're pretty close to a solid piece now. Things like this, I might not necessarily combine. Like, it's on top of the surface, but there's not much surface under here. Like, there's not much surface under this, so you might not combine that in there. Wouldn't make a whole lot of difference, I would think. Same with some of these buttons over here. Like, this whole section, like, you could maybe cut it out from behind. I don't think that would be a problem. If you wanted to cut out behind it, you could also just join like maybe the base pieces and leave the buttons and knobs on their own. So I'm just going to do auto Boolean unions. This is very close to each other. I just realized that. I don't know if they're actually supposed to be touching each other or not. If they're not, you just, make sure there's a little bit more separation perhaps. If you need them to join together, you would have to model them together or do a Boolean union and clean it up. I'm going to leave them separated because it's a little faster, but I think you get the idea there. These little bars here, also, you don't necessarily have to combine stuff like that either. I mean, it does save triangle count to leave them separated. But some people really like them combined. So what I'm going to do is try to do a union. And this is why something like this isn't always, it doesn't benefit you sometimes, right? Because this is causing issues in here. See that really bad kind of like stretch? This is not a triangle you want. This is not a direction for a face you want. So I'm going to try rotating that. You can right click and rotate edge, and then you can hit Shift R and just keep doing that, or use Machine Tools Smart Edge feature. I don't think it's going to give me what I want. I'm going to select these two vertices, press J, dissolve that one real quick. A lot of times things like this would go to a vertex. Not always, but it happens. The problem with doing things like this, I just want to point this out. If you're going to do this, it becomes harder to unwrap when you start creating triangles or n-gons, right? Well, n-gons can kind of be easy still, but a lot of times triangles and things like that, it gets messy. It's not worth it. If you want to try dissolving that, it won't dissolve because we need one additional edge in here somewhere that controls this area. So a lot of times you can just cut like one edge there. You can probably dissolve that now. See? Can't dissolve that one. Select these faces. Try dissolving it. It won't. So just leave it. Just move on. Probably cut this one up and dissolve that. See? If you cut to this side here like this, this is where you run into an issue as well, where this will triangulate sometimes to the nearest edge, but sometimes it goes all the way to the other edge, like this other vertex way down here. So you would just keep cutting that single edge out, maybe. If you want to cut quads, I mean, it's up to you, but it's going to be less optimized. So you don't always need them. But if you have to bring an edge all the way around a shape, sometimes you have to do that. It happens. If you can work them into a corner, usually it works out better. This one's pushing it a little bit, right? Like working it out to that corner. It's possible, but maybe a little bit much. This one would probably be okay because it's going to go to that corner or maybe up there or something, but it's not such a big issue for that one. Remember, it's about the triangulation at the end of the day, right? So triangulate modifier, check it. Turn that modifier on and turn it off in edit mode so you can work on your mesh. See if you got something that just isn't behaving right, like this vertex, for whatever reason. GG twice, A and merge by distance. Let's see how that works. Looks like this didn't join together. It's like back faces in here and stuff. Let's delete that face. And uh-oh, I created a hairy situation here. All right. Let's delete all of that face, right? We're going to try impromptu repair. Selecting all of these vertices, S, make sure I'm using the right direction here. S, Y, 0, okay. These have back faces to them. And I don't want those. I'll hit Alt Z and turn that off real quick. So if I see another one, I'll get rid of it. All right. I should be able to go through here and kind of make proper selections at some point. Alt Z that one on, delete that edge. All right. Yeah, this is a fun one. That's a big extra edge there, right? Let's grab that big one if we can get a hold of it and delete that one and see what happens. Sometimes you got to trial and error things. That's one of them right there. F and F. There you go. You can fill off of an edge if you got the two parallel edges to go with it. So that's mostly working. This one's probably doing the same thing. Maybe. Nope, it's not. All right. A little bit of a struggle there. Press F here. F here. Oh, we still got that vertex down here. We'll press F and we'll see if we dissolve that now. Yep, we can. Awesome. Let's keep moving. There's another vertex. And another. Let's dissolve. Yeah, unfortunately, we got to go through this process. Mesh can be finicky, for sure. You see that edge is not doing correct. Let's delete it. You can join these. Select that whole empty section, press F and join that. We should be able to dissolve that. I don't see why it was having problems before, but we'll go through and press F. Let's see if Machine Tools will get this. Usually it does, so there you go. Machine Tools cleanup feature is awesome. You can use it to merge, basically, as well. I mean, at the same time. And dissolve like degenerate vertices or whatever that was. All right, so you can see where that all goes. It takes some time to clean things up, make them right, get them perfect or whatever, but usually it's worth it by the end of it. In our case here, go ahead and keep doing the Boolean unions. Okay. These I might not merge into it. It wouldn't help much. It would just increase triangle count perhaps. I actually do like leaving the buttons and knobs separate. And it's usually because you want to rotate these things a little bit. And I like to texture them straight up and down, high poly to the low poly, with them kind of centered so I can mirror and stuff and do all that, especially if you have like little knobs or like arrows and things on them. But when you get to the game mesh, you know, you can just rotate these and set it up however you want. As long as your ambient occlusion matches, so you would have to rotate like certain amount of degrees to make sure the AO matches. So you hold control while rotating or whatever. Not too bad. You can always change things around a little bit after you bake everything and texture it. Takes a little time to get used to doing that, but it's definitely something you can do. A good practice exercise, if you want to go through it, is to work with diffuse textures only and don't worry about baking right away. And just build game models that are using just regular textures. You'll find that a lot of times you'll understand things a lot quicker that way. This one I'm going to leave as a bevel here, or chamfer, should I say. Single segment is a chamfer. I'm going to turn hard normals off, though. Apply that. We'll do the Boolean union. Clean it all up. Uh-oh. Let's clear all the sharps. Shade auto smooth. Get rid of the custom normal that I guess it created anyways. All right. You see this is a little bit better there. Okay. So we'll go ahead and attach this one too. Did I leave the other one like that, or did I sharpen it? No, I left it like that, right? Okay. So we'll attach that. Shade auto smooth. Get rid of custom normals again. If there are any. Oh, we got sharps this one. Okay. Maybe I had a weighted normal on it. That's what happened. Yeah, so you can turn things into a solid piece if you need to. It's really up to you to determine what needs to be kind of attached and doesn't need to be attached. Also, notice this one. This goes all the way back into this area. We don't need that like that. We can put this one literally all the way to the front and just sink it just below the surface a little bit maybe. And we'll save a lot of texture space that way as well. Some of these might have back faces. Don't need them. Here. Oh, did I do that right? I did not. Let's isolate those real quick. Okay, this one doesn't have a back face. This one doesn't need it either, though. I deleted the edges, I think is what happened there. Okay. Shade auto smooth. Let's see. We got a... This is fine, actually, for now. I'm just going to apply them because I can. You don't have to apply all your stuff right away until you're ready to UV map, basically. I would probably join this one to the base here. And I would want to set my origin point on this one in particular. Alt-click the back so you select the loop, and then use Shift-S in the machine tools. You know, you can just align to edge. Places the origin point right there, dead center, hopefully. So if we take all these and join it to that, shade it auto smooth, remove custom normals, shade auto smooth, and remove sharps. Weight normals now with the weighted normal modifier, keep sharp. All right, we got all that going. I want to show you something kind of interesting here. This is how you can make kit pieces that behave the way you want. We just set this up so we have the origin point flush against the back, right? If you hit Control period, you can adjust the rotation of the object as well. So if we wanted to have Z axis pointing out the front here, we could press RZ and hold Control while rotating and rotate this 90 degrees like so. And Z will point out the front now. Control period, turn that off. And if we take this object, we use face project, median, align rotation to target, Shift D to duplicate it. We hold control. You can make more or less your own little kind of a kit piece that'll go accordingly. All right. So the only thing I was trying to point out here is that you put Z out from the surface, right? From the base out. Y is usually up, but you might have to rotate. So like if you have to rotate on Z, you can hit Z twice sometimes, or you can do like whatever axis, Y in this case. Sometimes you might have to rotate this way as well. Just that would be spinning the object, basically. But Z goes out, that's all. All right. And so we can weight these normals all day long. You can see we still have like a little bit of weird shading here. Face influence, this area here, probably all the way around even. We might get away with doing a Alt-N, set face strength, set it to strong. Face influence here. That should correct a little bit of that weird shading that was in there. Still got some weird shading over here. This is a balance issue. Depending on what kind of effect you're going for, this might not be the position you want for these pieces. A lot of times you need to straighten these kind of things out a little. Start to balance them. A little tricky to get this going manually because it's very easy to mess it up. You can see set flow add-on probably won't help you much in this case. More than likely what happened here, if I had to take a guess, when you're working on objects, you see like it's 1, 1 here, but 0.9 here. That's non-uniform scale. Okay. Uniform scale is when they're all the same number. And when you bevel with non-uniform scale, this is not extreme enough to really notice it, but you'll get weird slants like this when you bevel or inset. Just weird things happen. So always Control A, apply scale when you get a chance. So you don't do it messes your tools up basically. But yeah, now we're cooking right now, right? Like we're pretty much done. We just go through and finish out the rest of the model for the most part. We'll apply that mirror. Once you apply a mirror, you can get rid of the empty if you don't want it. The bevel we can apply. Okay, clear sharps. And clear custom split normals. Weight the normals if you need to. Whatever the case. Okay, and so you can leave these as separate pieces, perhaps. There's nothing that says you have to combine all this together right off the bat. There's different ways of like importing into a game engine. Obviously, you can combine on import. But a lot of times, you're going to find that when it comes time to do certain things, like we'll say, I'm guessing this is like the outlet or something back here, right? This would be your low poly. So you do outlet low. I don't know, antenna thing. I don't know. Low. I'm going to call it the body. Do low. Okay. Now we have all these other little fun things. Like we could do like, and I go to this menu here a lot of times. We'll do like knob 01 low. So you can explode your mesh by use a naming convention. So if you had a high poly model you're going to bake from, knob 02 low. Yeah, you could give these all names and explode them if you needed to. So like your AO wouldn't bake into the background perhaps if you wanted to not do that. You don't have to though. And if you're not going to, you can just join these. So you only have body low, So something like that. Like this you might bake on its own perhaps, or not. You join it too if you want to. That's what I'm getting at. It's like a lot of things can just be joined back together into one solid piece. Not necessarily all the vertices are merged or anything like that, but a lot of it can be kind of recombined together. By the end of the process. Oh, we did not fix this over here on the other side, right? Did I mirror it? What happened here? I must have. I forgot what I did. All right. A lot of back and forth, right? So for UVs, I want to talk about it. We're not going to do a proper UV map on this because it does take a little bit of time. I'm just going to kind of mention it. These center edges, whether it's a bevel or it's sharp, right? Sharp wouldn't have a center edge. This is what you're following usually for UV maps. Or seams for UVs anyways. A lot of times you're trying to break your objects apart in this manner. If you need an additional edge, you need it. Okay? Don't be afraid of leaving it there. If you can dissolve some around it, you can dissolve some around it. This particular one really wants a custom normal. This is probably the worst issue on this that we're going to have. It's just the way it works out here for this. If oh, I forgot we got to mark it sharp anyways. So shade auto smooth. That sharp manually. Curious what happens if we get rid of that entirely. With it all marked sharp. Yeah, it didn't work out, did it? Let's just do the knife cut through here again. All right, so it does need the sharp, but it also needs that edge. Seems to work out better that way. All right, so Blender 4 has the mark sharps by angle. If you want to go into edit mode, you can Control E, you can mark sharp by angle. Over here, we have to select sharp edges, which they got rid of in Blender 4, which I'm not a fan of, but you can set this to whatever you want. To get a hold of sharp edges. We'll do 45, I guess, in this case. We can Control E, we can mark sharp. We should be able to also mark seams at the same time. And we will still have to go through and fix things, though. So this is, or if you're using hard ops, you can do mark as well, which usually works out fairly well. You can set it to mark seams if you wanted to in the preferences, but it's not. Oh, we're clearing that. It's actually something I don't really care to do because I don't want to use bevel weights if I'm not using them, or creases. So a lot of this stuff, I find that it's much easier to just auto smooth everything a lot of times. And then mark your seams, and then just mark your seams sharp that you need to mark sharp anyways. Just check everything before you call it done. This add-on that I'm using right now doesn't work in Blender 4, so, and it's not for sale anymore. It used to be for sale add-on. I don't know why you guys stopped supporting it. Maybe just got busy or something. But you make a pie menu, probably doing the same thing. There's a few tutorials online on how to create pie menus that are really good. Highly recommend them. Because eventually I'm going to have to end up making my own pie menus at some point. All right, yeah, but basically, you know, we don't even have to mark all of that necessarily. We're just kind of goofing off now at this point. You get the idea, you can start unwrapping. I said I wasn't going to unwrap all of this, but it looks like we're unwrapping all of it for some reason. All right. Something like this, you can do a boundary select. So select the loop. Select loop's boundary loop. Boom. Mark a seam. Call it a day. You can mark it on the top side or on the outside if you want. It's up to you. Things like this too. Boundary loop that. You got 2 seams for free. I don't think this is going to unwrap correctly because I have not been marking everything I need to mark. And I was so close to getting it all done, but I just wanted to keep going with it. But it's pretty close. Some of it you can't see. You can hide mesh in edit mode. You press H, right? And then Alt H, bring it back. So if you ever need to just see through something, you know, do that. This one we probably don't need to do. Maybe we do. It won't unwrap right, I think, if we don't. So also, if you get a chance to leave things together and kind of keep your seams hidden, like by placing them in just more nondescript areas, perhaps, then do that, right? Like if it's you're less likely to see this at the top here, then do it at the top. Like maybe it's on a TV stand, it's like up high or something. If this is on the bottom, obviously it'd be less likely to be seen. You don't even have to necessarily break everything up. You could sometimes leave them just together, basically. As long as it unwraps accordingly. Less seams is better for performance, technically. But yeah, there's a lot of little nuances in here. Let's clear that sharp thing here. I don't know. I don't know how that one happened there. And I think you already know what I'm about to do right here, right? So we can grab this pressing L. I'm going to hit Shift, unselect that, so it selects the whole thing. So hold Shift, hit seam, and it'll turn it off. What I'm going to do is I'm going to separate this real quick. In these here, Control Number-Pad plus to select more. Press C and separate those as selections too. I want these to be a group, okay? So when I duplicate this and send it up, oh, you know what? Let me do something better. Let me do something different. No, don't delete those yet. Don't delete that one. I'm going to hit Alt-D and then Z and Alt-D and Z. We're doing link duplicates right now. Alt-D and Z, right? So we can grab all three of those, delete them. Okay, so this object, when you do a link duplicate, you hit Alt-D instead of Shift-D. They're basically an instance of sorts. It's like a variable instance. So we edit one, it edits all of them. This will use the same texture, right? So if you ever want something to repeat the same texture over and over to save texture space, you can do things like this. I'm going to show you how you offset these here real quick. This is the trick here, okay? You could take this, and for the most part, you can't join these back together with it, right? They have to stay separate. So you'll be like knob low, and then you would do knob high or something like that, right? And you would do the whole body low. All right. And then these you can add back in later if you wanted to. You can just bake this as is, right? However, if you were to want to share UV space and you join things together, so they were linked duplicates or whatever, let's grab what we're going to unwrap first. So it's going to be that one with the main body. So we're not doing those. We go to UV editor, and I probably don't have this all unwrapped correctly, but okay, if you ever get lost, press A and then frame tilde key frame selected. You can find it again. Yeah, some things are just not splitting up correctly. It's pretty close. It looks about right. Not too bad. This is the main piece, I think. Turn on the connection tool. Or for connection tool, what is it called? The UV sync tool? I call it the connection tool. I don't know. It creates connections. Why is this exploding apart? What's going on here? I can't zoom in any further on my UV either. This is very bizarre. Let's get out of that AO thing. Figure out what's going on with this. Why is this all split apart? What's going on here? Merge by distance. I'm going to bump the merge by distance. Huh, it's very bizarre. Let's turn that off then. I want to figure out, okay, it splits it anyways. All right. What's going on there? Once you select something, you can tilde key view selected over here. Okay. And it'll zoom in on it. And then, so now we know where this is at least. That's good. It's back here. This is the seam I missed. Okay. Apparently I missed those ones. This one has somehow got a double seam. That's awesome too. I'm going to clear that sharp. I don't even know why there's a sharp in there. Yeah, so I probably have a bunch of sharps I don't need in here. I don't think about it because I did them by seam or whatever. All right, so let's unwrap that now. Okay. See, it says slightly tilted. Okay. Sometimes this still happens. If you use conformal instead of angle based, sometimes it straightens things out. It's kind of one of the weirdest things. Sometimes turning fill holes off as well helps things. Sometimes correct aspect, turn it off helps as well. In our case, I think we're mostly good. It's horribly packed right now, though. There's an add-on called Textile Density Checker. Calculate this thing. Density won't matter. Well, actually, the density does matter because this was already scaled accordingly, right? If it's not scaled, it's not going to matter. But our UV space efficiency right now is at 37%. It needs to be at like mid-80s would be ideal to the low 90s. If you go any higher than that, then you're UV overlapping. It's awesome. But if you can't get that going like that, then you're in some hurt here. So UV space at 37%, 40% almost no good. What we're going to do is we're going to use a regular packer here, but I'm going to show you real quick. We're going to pack to 0.06. Click OK. You see it rotates things at weird angles. You don't want that either. You want them up and down. So we're going to pack islands. Set the rotation method to cardinal. Click OK. And that's going to try to keep them up and down for the most part. When you have weird stuff like this left over, it still happens. If it's all quads, which this one might be all quads. Turn this UV sync off for a second. Use island selection, select the whole island. Text Tools add-on has, you guessed it, under UV layout, you can do the rectify. And you can stretch things out. It will cause distortion in the UV, but sometimes it's preferable to having these edges at a slight cant like this. That creates an aliasing effect. Not good. You don't want that. Now that might be a little bit too dramatic for some on how much it does that. You can always try straightening it as well. You can straighten like one edge and everything else kind of relaxes from it, which is I always thought was kind of interesting. It's kind of a fun one. And this add-on won't do both at the same time, but the add-on that's not for sale anymore that I was talking about, it happens to do that both at the same time, which is awesome. In our case, I think we'd be better off rectifying. Don't forget, you can always check under here, this drop down, display stretch. You can do things by angle or by area, right? And you just can kind of go through and balance things out as needed. So if something's not quite right, like this face is too big in the middle. Nope, this face. Like you can see, we might need to make it bigger or smaller, right? We don't want to overlap, obviously, with the other UVs around it, but it's too small, basically. That's all we're getting at here. So could we grab maybe some vertices and just scale it out like that, make it better? Yeah. Blue, that dark blue is usually what you're looking for. These green ones, I'm not going to worry about right now, but after you go through and you manually correct things, some of these cylindrical pieces as well, you need to split them. I'm going to mark seams on these real quick. Once you mark a seam on it, you should be able to rectify it. If you didn't know you can do that. So that's always a cool thing you could do. The only problem with this technique is when you're marking these seams, we're hitting Control E, mark seam. When you're marking these seams and you're rectifying it, you don't know where you're marking that seam at. So on the cases of these guys here, I think one of those was one we marked. It's way over here on the bottom. That's good, but you don't want them like up here usually. If you can get away with like hiding them on the bottom, it'd probably be better. Things like that. All right. So, you know, you can always go back and pack this again if needed. And depending on your texture size, what you're creating, if you're doing a 4K document, you need to have a 32 pixel gap between things. If it's close enough, you'll probably be okay. If you're going to do a 2K texture, 2048 by 2048, it needs to be 16 pixels. And this goes down. So the 1024 would be like 8 pixels and so on and so forth, right? This is for MIP maps. This is why that matters. When your textures automatically generate MIP maps usually. They're kind of like LODs for textures. And they get blurrier and blurrier as they get smaller and smaller. So that bleed room between these islands, all that allows is that the MIP maps don't bleed from one island into the other island. That's the idea behind it. So, I mean, wasn't even going to go over all this in this video, but I want to pack this again because I don't like the way it laid out. I think it was a little bit too cramped in a corner. I mean, it's okay. Let's see what our textile density is at. Calculate again. So we went up to a 61%, a little bit better. UV overlaps. I said I was going to mention it. We're unwrapping this one right now. These are all duplicates. Let's say this was all joined together so we can bake the AO into place on this whole thing. All right. But we want to texture this in Substance Painter, or we want to bake it in Substance or something like that. Or we want to bake it here in Blender. You see how these are all broken up, kind of like in these weird areas? This is what happens when you don't manually unwrap things, by the way. Some stuff like that, right? If you're going to go to Substance, so you press G, X, and 1. Yeah, so you select it all, press G, X, 1, and you can move it off to the side here. So what's going to happen is that these themselves won't bake, right? The model itself will bake. It'll bake the ambient occlusion into the background. But this is the only one that will bake a high to a low. These won't bake highs to lows, basically. Okay? If you did that accordingly. And so when you head over to Substance, you bake it this way, but you export another one where it's GX -1, where it's like that. And then what ends up happening is that you can paint on the other models. You can swap them in and out in Substance if you need to. That's kind of the idea there, is that you can go back and forth. So you export 2 models, one with them offset, one without them offset. And after you bake it, you swap it for the other model where they're not offset anymore. That'll let you paint on these, right? If they're offset, you can't touch these. It won't paint on them. So you can paint on any one of them if you put them back to where they were originally, basically. It's a pretty neat little trick. I like that one. So for the most part, I think we're kind of good here. Let's try Packmaster real quick. You can do pixel margins with these ones, but I'm going to just go with heuristic, advanced heuristic. I'm sorry, this is so fast, guys. It's a lot of information to put out. And so we'll pack it, see what happens. It's pretty dense. Let's bump it up a tiny bit. Okay. You can see it's actually getting a worse result right now. We were at like 65% or something like that, I think. Sometimes Blender's Packer does better than Packmaster. Sometimes Packmaster does a lot better than Blender's. It's kind of back and forth. The only thing I'm thinking is that we joined those pieces back together and I didn't leave them offset, so somehow it influenced it. But in reality, they should be finding every little crack and crevice and falling into the appropriate areas. So I don't know about that. In that case, if we mess that up that bad, we might just duplicate that out and just do it again. It's a possibility. Or we could try to Control Z back and hope we get lucky. What I think I'm going to do, sometimes those numbers are a little bit misleading, by the way, the percentages. Because you could have overlapping UVs, but there's other things you can do too, like certain areas of your model, you might not need as much detail in them. Like maybe these little sections here. Maybe not that one. Let's not. Yeah, we'll do that whole section actually. If we can get a hold of it. Okay, press L, select by seam now. Okay, and then you can hit Shift L. Oops, sorry, L. Shift L to deselect. But L. Okay, and L. Maybe like some of these bottom ones. Maybe we don't need them to be as large as they are. Right? Maybe they're eating up too much space or something. Also hold Shift, unselect that. Keep going with L. Oh, not that one. By seam. There you go. Yeah, sometimes you gotta do things like this too. It's kind of weird, but we'll see what happens. See if we can get some more density out of it. Yeah, whole section and that back section too. Why not? All of these. I think I'll do all of them. Not as likely to see the back, I think. Maybe. Who knows? I'm going to scale these down by... I'm going to do by 0.75. So S 0.75. We'll do that first. And I'm going to deselect all these back here. And that one. Using cursor selector real quick. These ones here, make sure I got the right ones. I'm going to scale these down by 0.75 again. So it'll be a 50% reduction on those ones. All right, so we should be able to pack that again. Yeah, like I was saying, it might not help the percentage, but you can definitely see there's a little bit more space being utilized. Let's see what our textile density is actually at. .12. So let's say it's a 4096. You can see where density is at 33 now. That's extremely good. But let's do pixel margin. Should be 32. You see, this is why I don't fully believe that, by the way. I don't think that's always correct. Unless you have a texture in here. I don't think it has a size. Oh, it does right there. Let's try that again. 4096 pack. Okay, there you go. That's more like it. Still not getting over 60 though. I would consider overlapping if this was going to be a problem. Like there's certain elements we don't need to repeat, like this left side and this right side. They don't have to share, like they don't have to be unique textures. Like this could be unique, that could be unique, but the other side doesn't. So when you mirror it, right, like this could be unique, that doesn't have to be unique. The buttons, right? Also, the way this was combined together in general, there's a lot of like just excess space in here that probably could get rid of and keep the seam simpler and things like that. There's all kinds of different ways of saving UV space. Anyways, like a double seam there apparently. Yeah, take your time on this stuff. It's still calculating though. Usually it stops pretty quick, so it's 60-ish% right now. I don't think it's going to get much better though. It's fun just watching it though, like all the little different angles it tries. All right, so we'll stop it there. Done being amused now. All right, let's go to text tools. Let me save this real quick because I am going to send this off to somebody. And let's see what happens with the bake here. Oh, text tools, baking section. I always forget that this is where it's at in the UV editor. All right. We'll do samples 128, bake at not 4K, but we'll do a 2K. Let's bake the AO. We're going to set up a material manually. We're not going to get all messed up over this. New material, shading editor. Shift A, create texture, image texture. Open up the knob AO, I guess is what we're calling it. Base color. Boom. Clean, right? Not too bad for Blender baking. So, little stuff like this, I could have rounded out, but you can see the overlaps work. And this is the whole idea of going through this process. This is like a bunch of just critical information for creating low polys. And we're not even talking about baking high polys to low polys. This is just like how to prep low polys, right? With the idea in mind that like you just have to do kind of weird, odd things sometimes. It works, but it's just like you could have kept these feet separate, perhaps. Like, you know, you don't have to add everything together. We do apparently. I forgot to do the screen. So the screen rendered, but it's not part of the model right now, is what I'm guessing. And it didn't get unwrapped, or it's isolated, or something goofy's going on here with that. Where's this thing at? I don't even know. Oh, there it is. Okay. So we'll call this screen. Like you could leave this as a separate object. Imagine if you're doing like a broken screen, right? And see if we can select everything in here. Use a cursor selector. See what I'm saying? Like you could possibly get away with that, especially if you solidify it. Right? So let's do that bake again real quick. We're going to call it body this time. And usually you do body low part and then body high part. If you have a high, and you'll do bake target. Just like you need a cage for it as well. Blah, blah, so forth. That's for another video, right? This one to this one. All right, let's try this. UV editor. Bake body low. When that's done, we're going to unwrap the screen, I think. We're going to keep it as a separate thing. Actually, no, we could just make it a material. A lot of times, well, depends on if you want the TV to ever turn on and off or whatever, have glass in it. Yeah, see, it'll cast the ambient occlusion into there now, hopefully. That was the idea anyways. Still doesn't look right though. So, I should have combined that, huh? Where's this thing at? I didn't unwrap this, did I? No. I'm a little confused. Why is this doing that? Solidify? No. Yeah, see, it should be baking pretty. It should be pretty noticeable. So I'm trying to maybe We renamed it and changed the name. Body AO. Yeah, there we go. It's like, why is this not looking right? That's what we're looking for. That kind of drop in effect. So later on, like you would have mapped this to obviously the main body piece too, but I don't want to go back and deal with those UVs. But later on, basically this would end up being its own material or part of the texture anyways. And so you would end up with possibly something like that. You can see the UV maps get kind of weird. Or excuse me, the shading gets kind of weird. And it's really hard to correct stuff like that sometimes. You would probably want to use the base mesh before you went and distorted it and whatnot, but yeah. But that's the basic idea for the most part. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to step back. I'm going to reopen this file real quick. Back at this point. I'm going to you might want to bake things separately sometimes. It's kind of challenging to do. I think I'll save that for another video. But let's go to knob blow real quick. Let's take this interior section, just delete it. H or /. We can do this too. We can take something like this, unwrap it, and we can do conformal if needed. We'll move it out to the side. We're going to join it to the base here. Okay. I think this is one of the best things about Packmaster right here. It should all still be set, but we can do pack to others. You see? This is a simple thing. Like we could have scaled it, put it in there, but it's just little things like that. Because if it was like really crazy amount of small things or something, we could still do that. But yeah, let's go ahead and rebake. And we'll do that one more time. I don't know why it's being called knob low. Let's do television low. Or TV low. The low naming doesn't matter in this case. It's only when you're doing high to low that really matters. It's just that it's good habit that you tag things as what they are. Like if it's the knob, if it's TV, the antenna, you get a high poly antenna, a low poly antenna, and you're wanting to do exploded mesh, you name them accordingly, right? You do that in Marmoset, Substance, Blender with text tools add-on, same thing. All right. We're going to do a tangent bevel bake. This one will be fun. Bevel samples up. Radius, we can bump down to like 0.02 or 0.03 or something like that, I think it is. And we'll bake this one as well. All right, it's a bevel bake. So it's going to look rounded. Like all these will look like they're beveled now. It's going to be pretty wild. It's a uniform bevel, so it's not really that interesting, but it's something you could do on some low poly, like high poly workflows. You just create a low poly mesh, you bevel bake it, throw some texture on it. It looks pretty good usually. You can even hand paint like custom normals and stuff in Substance or height maps or whatever. Or here in Blender even. It's a lot of stuff, right? It just keeps going on and on and on. That's taken a little longer than I expected, though, to be honest. If you're going to use text tools to bake, turn anti-aliasing on to 2x or 4x. But just remember, it's going to be 2 or 4 times your texture size. So if you're doing a 1024, it's going to be out there, right? You're doing 1024 and it's 2x, it's going to be 2048 or 4096 if it's 4x. And Blender might be crashing right now too, by the looks of it. Oh, you know what? Maybe it's not. Bevel samples is at 256. I think it used to only go up to like 16. I think I just maxed it. And yeah, so it's struggling. It's a lot of samples. That's kind of funny, actually. It probably is crashing. Oh, no, it didn't. It baked it. All right, cool. Yeah, let's not go that high. Let's do like 32 instead. These are going to be, I think, ray misses, but we're not doing high to low. I don't understand what happened there. That's odd. Yeah. They just expanded too much, maybe? Or they're inverted. I'm not real sure what happened with that. Let's try doing the normal bake again with the 2x. Because we're only doing like what? 1020? Yeah, 1024. Let's do that. If you have really small artifacts near edges, like barely noticeable almost, it's probably you need to use a higher resolution and more anti-aliasing if possible. This has a curious side effect too. This bevel shader bake. It's gonna make everything look like it was this one big piece. Like this here should get a bevel on the screen. Like the knobs will get bevels. It's crazy. Like it bevels everything usually. Even if they're detached. Well, if you bake them all separately, it would be different. But if you bake them all in the same pass, it does it all at the same time. Really weird. I mean, it's really cool too. Like you take like intersecting mesh and make it look like it's all joined together, but I don't know if that's beneficial all that much. I haven't done that on purpose really, so there we go. Let's go to our shader, grab it, do new, image texture. We're gonna load both of those up. AO first. Uh-oh, it didn't save the AO. Uh-oh. It did not. And then the normal is going to go into a vector. Normal map. And you need to set this to the normal. Yeah, it should be non-color. Okay, that's pretty rough looking. I'm not going to lie. Let's turn that down. That's the bevel shader for the most part. So detach this for a second. So you don't want nothing attached when you bake, right? That's probably what half the problem is. It's too much. We want this down to like 0.00, maybe 5, I think. That might be part of the reason it had issues. I knew something looked wrong. I don't know why it's so slow though while I'm recording. Honestly, that's really slow for some reason. All right, so when this is done, I'm gonna just save this normal map, whether it's right or wrong. Because if I start another bake, I think it erases it. Is what's going on. A little bit goofy, but we'll try it. Yeah, this will be a little bit tighter. Yeah, you see the errors kind of went away now. That's good. All right, so let's just save this out to the desktop. You don't even have to name it. Just save it as 16-bit desktop. TV, normal tangent bevel, boom, non-colored, done. Okay. You could pack them too if you wanted to. But once we've done that, I need to do the AO now. Yeah, we'll just bake that real quick as well. I have a feeling the AO will bake faster than the normal for some reason. Oh, you know what's going on? It's rendering on CPU. I forgot to change it back to GPU. You can change that in the preferences of the add-on. So I guess my CPU doesn't like baking normals. Anyways, we save this one out too. Desktop. All right. Go to the shading tab. We will open from the desktop now. We got an AO. And we got a normal tangent. Make sure it's still set to non-color and sRGB. Actually, that could be non-color too, I think. But change that strength to 1. All right. So there we go. We managed to make it through this whole video to this point. Awesome. All right. And so with the bevel shader, you don't really have to do anything special with it. Like, you just use it. As long as you got good UVs, good modeling, for the most part, it'll work. Here's a little stepping action from the ambient occlusion. And this is, or it could be the normal even. Can't really tell. This is going to be when you intersect mesh. This happens. If you use a higher resolution, it's less noticeable. Okay. Things like that. But the rest of this should look pretty good. You can see the bevel shader here did this number, I think. It might be even the AO. It's hard to tell sometimes. Let's detach the AO for a second. We'll find out in a sec. Yeah, see that bevel shader merges everything, or tries to merge everything together. It's very noticeable in some ways. So it will do everything. Like literally, like I was saying, even the screen is trying to make the buttons. It's over here doing it. It's just insane. You want to do them in separate pieces. You can bake in separate pieces and combine it to the same texture. With text tools, where it says clear image, it says it somewhere in here. It used to say it. Yeah, you used to be able to not clear the image, and you were able to just keep baking. You bake to like one texture or whatever. But I guess you can just pick it now, maybe. So when you select a different object, you can pick which one you bake to or something. Yeah, so that's pretty cool. You got that going. Let's do, I'm gonna go to render preview. I'm gonna set this scene light, scene world. No, we'll do material preview. We'll check scene lights as well. I'm gonna use a different matte cap, or excuse me, HDRI, not matte cap. I'm gonna set this up on a plane. It's about where it should go. Wait a second. Did they become unsynced here? Oh, they did. All right. Don't worry about that then. What I want to do is just want to create an area light, bring it up. I want some shadow. That's all I'm looking for. I'm going to use contact shadows. We can change the size of this thing. It doesn't have to be super large. I want a little bit of an amber light. And a little bit of a blue one. And I try to point these kind of at each other a little bit. See what I'm saying? All right. And both contact shadows. And when we look at this thing, we could crank some different settings around. So first, we're using scene lights. The strength I'm dropping. We can turn on, we don't need to do, we could do indirect lighting with Eevee if we wanted to, but we could crank the shadow strength up, or the sizes up. Curves, performance, high quality normals, screen space, bloom, ambient occlusion. Turn the bloom size down, or intensity. Both of those can go down. Viewport denoising. If you want to crank the viewport settings up, you can. Turn half trace off, turn refraction on, trace precision up. Turn edge fading up, why not? High bit depth shadows, and Right. So when you're making game props, guys, as soon as I switch out of that window, shift tilde key, hit G, and you can walk around, right? That's a pretty small TV. It's way down here. But it's pretty solid, right? Like it's, you wouldn't know this was only a low poly. There was no high poly involved, right? And that extra little bit of bevel to everything, the bevel shader, just makes it look really nice. So there are high to low poly workflows, which usually work out better, I think. But this is a super fast, efficient workflow as well. You can't go wrong with this either. There's guys that do this on a regular for game models, and nobody knows that they're doing it for the most part. It's really hard to tell unless you know this technique, if someone's done it or not. And once you see it, you'll never unsee it. There's a lot of guys that make models this way. And they look fantastic. This TV needs a TV stand, though, because right now it is most definitely down on the floor. So I'm going to go ahead and leave this video here. We're going to take a look at ArtStation for a second. Okay. And on ArtStation, you have Joe Sieber, right? He goes over how to make a TV on a cart. Watch this inside and out. He does everything exactly the way you should. And it's the proper professional way of doing it. And it might be a little bit of a slower way of doing things, right? He's going to do it in Max, by the way, but you can do it in Blender too. It might be a little bit slower to do high poly and then low poly and then set it all up. But it's the most straightforward way of doing it. Like, you'll be able to pick up all the things you need to know doing that way. So then later on, you can find ways of cheating the system and finding ways to speed up, right? If you're doing high to low polys, that is. And I'm always going to recommend that. Start with high polys, model what you need, and then make a low poly around it as needed and bake it, right? It's much easier to create low polys around a high, I think, than just trying to convert maybe lows into high polys. I mean, this still is a pretty fascinating result, but it's not perfect. And it's kind of a cheap way of doing it. You know what I'm saying? It's not maybe the best way of doing it, but it's fast. I mean, if you model it kind of correctly from the start, this goes extremely fast. But if you have a trouble with just modeling low polys, practice this more and more. Go through this process. It'll make more sense when you do high polys to low polys, I think. Just playing around a lot with low polys, textures, UV maps, and even just doing general baking. Don't even worry about the high to low stuff right away. Do this for a bit, get used to it. That's how I learned. But then start doing the highs to lows, right? That adds a level of complexity to it to a degree. There's a lot of complexity to this too by itself. So separating the two, I think, could be beneficial. But once you understand high to low, you're golden. I mean, that's the hardest thing you can probably do, I think, in 3D is trying to optimize game assets and create highs and low polys and bake them together. It's a challenge, even for like myself. Even when I'm working on a project, it still challenges me. I run into issues. I run into errors. I got to figure out why something didn't bake the way I wanted still. And a lot of times I missed things or I screwed up on something. So that's going to happen. And, but anyways, that's it pretty much for this video. What I want to go ahead and do is also say, if you want to look at another model that's really good, and these are high to low models, by the way, you can go to appliances on Polyhaven, and there's a coffee cart by Joe, right? So if you want to go download that thing and check it out, this is an excellent example of how your model should be looking as far as optimization goes for game assets. It's still pretty dense with the 27,000 triangles, but for the most part, this is about as optimized as it gets. It's really tough to do anything more optimal than this. And you can see how it all looks. There might be some areas to kill off a little excess, but I mean, this is a pretty Kind of standard thing here, right? Oh, I can't dissolve that like that? I thought I could. Maybe I can't. You can always Alt-J, turn everything into quads. It tries to anyways. It doesn't get it all right, but something's triangulated, Alt-J it. So you can see like that. All got done pretty well from that Alt-J. Little things like that go a long way though. Yeah. A lot of fun this is. So take a look at the topology, download the model here. Even over here, some things, oh, that's a screw. That's right. I thought it was like a bar sticking out of the side of it or something. From this angle, it doesn't look like a screw much. All right. Same screw probably as well. I have a feeling that all of these are using the same texture space, should I say. Two different texture spaces. Looks like he has 1, 2, 3, and 4 of those. Yeah, so very simple model though, right? In nature. Let's not do cycles right yet. All right. His bevels are much tighter. They're there, but they're very tight compared to that big one I used over there. These still look very nice though. All right. And so, last but not least, when you're done playing around with all that, don't forget, practice making high polys, because sometimes it's easier to just make a high poly, right? Because what you end up doing is, let me turn these on. You can create all your base materials and kind of organize your materials in your mind as well. And then you create everything in just extreme detail, or as much detail as you need. And what ends up happening is you can use this as a color ID map. So it makes texturing on a low poly easier as well when you have a color ID. Otherwise, if you're just doing a low, you have to hand paint your color IDs or select polygons and try to create color IDs and things like that. But or use vertex colors and whatever else. There's all kinds of different ways of doing that. But using materials, just like as if you were creating any regular 3D model, and you can turn these into your clown map or color ID map later on. Super useful. So, and you get to, you know, later on bake these things down, right? You don't have to stay subdivision mesh and all that. Bake it to a low. You know, low polys a lot of times can be made from high polys, by the way. So in the case of something like this, you might even just remove the subdivision. That might be enough, you know. Or you subdivide it one time, maybe apply it, limit dissolve it by 0.05. Let's create some n-gons at least. So not much on this one anyways, but you see it's still gonna be a very smooth, curvy piece for a video game if you use that. A little too dense perhaps. So you would work this back down, guys. That's the big thing. You want to work them back down at a certain point. Kind of shift things around, change them up. Turn that into your low poly. And of course you'd unwrap it and do all that fun stuff, right? If you like excess, you don't need the excess maybe. Or every other one of these you don't need or something. Maybe you don't need that one. Maybe you just want this one right here and you want to dissolve that. Right? Synchronize it. Optimize things like that, you could. You can also collapse things sometimes. That's going to get into another video though. Like all the little reductions you might be able to do. Kind of add up. It's really tricky to get some of them right. Like merging certain things in certain areas. These don't unwrap very well. I'll put it that way. So a lot of times you have to do like weird data transfer stuff if you start doing crazy stuff. But for the most part, get rid of what you can, and you only keep what you absolutely need. You can still use sharps if you wanted to go back down to the sharps there. You don't need all this, right? Anyways, so a little too far into this video now, I think. How long has it been? I didn't even check. Oh, an hour and 45 minutes. 2-hour video, guys. All right. Hopefully I didn't ramble on too much. And if you enjoyed the video, leave a like, subscribe, all that fun stuff. Yeah, there's a lot to 3D. I know it's overwhelming sometimes, but like once you get the rhythm of this, you get the hang of it. It's simple. It really is. It's just a lot of like things, but it's not like hard things. Once you understand what the different little tricks are, and once you remember them, I think that's the hardest part, remembering it, right? It's all these shortcuts and hotkeys, but once you remember it, you're good, and you'll be able to do this all day. It's like playing with Play-Doh after a while. It's real fun. Anyway, so I'll check you guys out in the next video. I hope you enjoyed the hour and 46-minute video. I think it's the longest one I did so far. Anyways, I'll see you in the next one. All right, take care.